Let's go to our topic of the week now. Indonesia has been involved in a number of trade disputes with several countries at the World Trade Organization, or WTO. But unfortunately, the countries lost in most of the litigation cases.
President Joko Widodo has recently expressed pessimism that Indonesia's appeal against the decisions of the World Trade Organization, or WTO, on Indonesia's nickel export ban will be accepted. However, the president said that even if the WTO finally rejects the appeal, Indonesia will continue with its downstream program in the mining sector. The case began when, in November 2019, the EU filed a lawsuit to the WTO regarding Indonesia's raw nickel export ban policy, which is considered detrimental to the nickel industry in the EU countries. In response to the ruling, Indonesia filed an appeal in December 2022 to be considered by the WTO's appellate body. Fortunately for Indonesia, the WTO's initial ruling does not have legal force until their appeal has been heard. At present, both Indonesia and European Union are still waiting for the WTO's final decision. In addition to the nickel export ban case, Indonesia has also lost in a number of legal suits taken to the WTO by the country's trading partners. At present, Indonesia is waiting for the WTO ruling on its biofuel lawsuit against the EU. In 2019, Indonesia filed a World Trade Organization's lawsuit against the EU, claiming that the bloc's renewable energy directive was discriminatory. The RED II sees the EU phasing out palm oil-based biofuel by 2030, claiming that such products might be at high risk of indirect land use changes. The EU alleges that biofuel production might take place on crop land previously destined for food. This can lead to farmers extending the production of agricultural land into areas with high carbon stock, such as forests, potentially negating the emission savings from biofuel use. The biofuel may be exempt from the limitations if the palm oil is classified as low risk of ILOC. RED II scheme will not be the last. Effective from 29 June 2023, the European Union has implemented the European Union Deforestation Regulations, which is aimed at ensuring that products consumed by EU citizens do not contribute to global deforestation or forest degradation. The EUDR will hinder imports of products that have been accused of contributing to deforestation, such as palm oil, which could severely hurt Indonesia and Malaysia, the largest producers of palm oil in the world. The EUDR will particularly hurt smallholders due to their limited capacity to comply with the regulation. Both Indonesia and Malaysia have strongly protested the EUDR, which will consequently harm their economic interest as major producers and exporters of crude palm oil, or CPO. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi said recently that Indonesia and Malaysia had strongly opposed in the EU deforestation regulation in international forums such as the 24th ASEAN-EU Ministerial Meeting in Brussels, Belgium on February 2nd, 2024. That trade protectionism disguised as environment protection is growing amid the tightening of the global economy. As this trend will likely continue, Indonesia has to strengthen its diplomacy with the help of competent legal experts in international trade and facing growing discriminatory trade practices.
Now, in addition to the nickel export ban case, Indonesia has also lost in a number of legal suits taken to the WTO by the country's trading partners. At present, Indonesia is waiting for the WTO's ruling on its biofuel lawsuit against the EU. Now, joining us today is Professor Aryawan Gunadi, expert in business law and international trade, where he will talk about the handling of the country's trade disputes with other countries at World Trade Organization. Hello, Professor Aryawan.
Hi, Ibu Luisa and all the TVRIs Tvri. Well, thank you very much for the invitations.
It's good to have you back again, Professor Aryawan. Thank
Good
you
to have
for
you too.
joining through Zoom. Now, first off, President Joko Widodo has recently acknowledged that Indonesia might be defeated in its appeal against the WTO's ruling on the nickel ore export ban. If, Professor, if the WTO finally rejects Indonesia's appeal, what should the government do? Should they stop the export ban, or what would be the right action?
Thank you very much for the questions. Of course, stop the export ban and ignore WTO's ruling has its own advantage and disadvantage based on my point of view. If we see if Indonesia stop the nickel export ban, there are several advantages. That compliance with WTO and ending the ban will demonstrate Indonesians' commitment to WTO regulations because this is very important for us. And of course, resuming export could improve that trade relations with the EU, a major market for Indonesians nickel for sure. And of course, it could be increase in revenue, and lifting the ban could lead to higher export earning for Indonesians nickel industry. But if we see what is the disadvantage? Of course, there will be a loss of control over resources, and stopping the ban might limit Indonesians' control over its natural resources. And this is we have to underline. And its domestic downstream and nickel processing industry, lower prices, and increased global supply of nickel could lead to lower export prices for Indonesians. And what is the environmental concerns? Some argue if the ban was implemented to reduce environmental damage from unregulated mining, and it could lead to a research of such issues. But if we see in another side, how if Indonesians ignore the WTO's ruling? There are also the advantage, I think, that maintain control, that Indonesia would retain control over its nickel resources and continue developing its domestic processing industry. And also there will be disadvantage if we know about trade retaliations. The EU could impose retaliatory tariff on other Indonesian exports, harming its overall economic. And we have to see also the WTO sanctions. WTO will potentially authorize the EU to take further trade sanctions against Indonesians and damage reputations. Because why? Because Indonesian reputation in WTO will damage Indonesians' reputations reliable with all the trading partners. This is that we have to underline. That nevertheless, it is worth noting that Indonesia could explore solutions with the EU to mitigate economic downside while partially satisfying WTO that we have to know. I think that's the point.
Finding the middle ground, yeah? Now, Professor,
Yes, you're right.
Indonesia has been involved in several legal fights at the moment on trade disputes at the WTO, but unfortunately, so far, Indonesia has been defeated in most of the cases. Can you please explain why does the government's legal capability to win legal fights seem so weak? What is the problem?
Yes, if we see that that limited resources and expertise, this is one of the issues. Compared to developed nations, the Indonesia might have a specializing might have smaller pool of, I think, need more legal expert and lawyers specializing in international trade law, because it's important to defend our case in WTO. Like President Jokowi said that this is very important for us, especially when we appeal into WTO. Secondly, is data and evidence gathering. This is very important. We have to know that the quality of the lawsuits. This is very important. The appeal, which could be leading to loss. We have to attention all the appeal positions. Third is the bargaining position weakness. This is very important. Indonesia frequently lost at the WTO and can be attributed to a combinations of factors, and one of them is that our weakness in our bargaining positions into another countries, especially in WTO. strategic consideration, this is very important, that the government might priorities political or economic goals over a potential victory at the WTO. This could involve setting a case outside of the formal and resolution process. Even it's making concession and starting their legal arguments, I think. And of course, this is very important. All the weakness that we have to accumulate and we have to see and we have to sitting down to repair our positions.
Well, it seems that our weakness is still plenty in terms of having a stronger legal fight. Now, the protectionism at the moment is growing amid the tightening of the global economy. In your opinion, what should the government do, hence, to fight against such unfair trade practices that continue to increase so far?
Of course, Indonesia can collaborate with other developing countries and facing similar challenges. And this could involve forming alliances to push for fair trade rules and challenge. And collaborating with developing countries is very important, as we know that now Indonesia is the processing is currently doing the accessions of OECD member. So this is very prestigious because why? Because Indonesia will leave as the middle income trap countries, and this is very important. And secondly, Indonesia can explore strategic partnership for sure with developed countries. What is the interest in free and open trade? And this could improve a bilateral agreement that create a more level playing field, in the same playing field for Indonesian export. Thirdly, that developing a robust system for collecting and analyzing trade data can provide valuable evidence to support arguments against protectionism, as you said. And Indonesia counter accusations that may be used to justify trade restrictions, while investing in training and other resources, also very important for international trade law negotiations. And also for while advocating for free trade, that the government can still implement safeguard, because this is one of the legal instrument that we can save our local trade in Indonesia, especially to protect our product, local product. So if they giving a tax imposed to Indonesia, we can use a safeguard. I think Brazil and Turkey last time has done it. And fourthly, Indonesia can address environmental concerns sometimes used to justify protectionism by promoting sustainable practice in its industries. And we can implement regulation and collaborating with trading partners to develop mutually agreeable standards.
I see. So the key points here to take away is actually to form alliances as well as strong strategic agreement with other countries to back us up. Now, Professor, the negotiations for a free trade agreement between the European Union and Indonesia have reached their final stage. Do you think that the trade disputes with the EU would actually hamper the negotiation process?
Yes. Firstly, that if we see the recent dispute, particularly the unresolved issues of nickel exports and palm oil, that now we having a case in palm oil in WTO for sure, can create tension and distrust between the two sides, and this can make negotiations more difficult. Because why? Because and less favorable terms for Indonesians. And secondly, Indonesia frequently lost in WTOs might weaken its bargaining positions, because in our data that Indonesia frequently lost in WTO. And of course, we weak in FTA negotiations, free trade negotiations. The EU might be less willing to make concessions if they perceive Indonesia as likely to defend its interests effectively. However, the FTA negotiations could present an opportunity to resolve existing trade dispute and creating stronger relationship between two nations. Both sides might more willing to compromise to achieve a broader trade agreement. Indonesia and EU can try to finding, it's a middle ground, and the FTA negotiations could prevent an opportunity to resolve, creating stronger relationship within among the members. And Indonesia and the EU can try to finding middle ground, as I said before, by addressing the EU concerns about environmental practices examples, and the EU acknowledging Indonesia's right to develop its domestic industries while ensuring for trade practices. And as we know that protectionism and liberalizations is, two keywords that always been debating among the experts. Thank you.
Professor, you also once said that many of our international trade agreements that Indonesia have made have brought to a loss to Indonesia. Are you still fixed on this statement? And can you please elaborate more on this statement?
Yes. Of course, as I mentioned before in previous interview, that there are aspects that Indonesia suffered a loss because we weak in negotiating international trade agreement, because as we know that Indonesia has joined bilateral, regional, and multilateral trade agreement. And now, currently, we are discussing also the EU-Indonesian trade agreement and also several trade agreements. If we see that there are short-term gains versus long-term risks that need to be addressed, that the hope of immediate economic benefits like increase of export, and foreign investment can be a strong motivator, and these gains can be attractive for government seeking to boost economic growth and create jobs in the short term. And second one, that developing countries like Indonesia often have less leverage in trade negotiations because it's not in the same playing field. And compared to developed nation, we are, we have to develop more in negotiating. And this can limit their ability to negotiate the favorable terms and might force them into accept some concessions if we're not careful on this. And thirdly, but on the other side, sometimes the anticipated benefits of a trade can be miscalculated, underline miscalculated. Developing countries may underestimate the potentials, downsides, such as the impact of domestic industries. And we have suffered loss from this unequal agreement, especially in the terms of domestic economics. I think this is we and the government also have to pay attention of unequal agreements. We have to check one by one. For example, the investor state default dispute settlement (ISDS) provisions in some agreements allow foreign companies to sue government in international tribunals. Now, this is that we have to be careful. Also, the EUDR emphasize of the environmental friendly concept and environmental issue associated with protections, process, and sustainable practices. And all in all, certain agreements might limit Indonesia's ability to control its natural and restrict policies aimed at developing domestic industries, that we have to be careful on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So in conclusion, it's just we need to make better negotiations, stronger negotiations to prevent more losses in the future and getting more benefits from all of these trade agreements. Professor Aryawan Gunadi, expert in business law and international trade, thank you so much for your insights, and we're looking forward to have a chat with you again next time.
Thank you very much,
Professor.
It's an honor. Thank you very much.